The story begins with the office where the phone call was heard, violating the silence in the room. The operator girl immediately responded to the call, but the client was very angry about the company's products. As soon as the girl heard all this, she straightened her glasses and thought to herself, "Again it began, and a day." The girl asked what the client's problem was, but he said that she forgot how to understand people. After that, the client put the pipe displeasedly, and the girl yawned with a tired look. The girl's eyes stuck together. She really wanted to sleep and blamed herself for not lying on time, but read the short story. Because of fatigue, the girl closed her eyes, and not noticing this, plunged into a deep dream. After which she suddenly felt another atmosphere, and opening her eyes, she saw the royal chambers and the king on the throne. The king was very angry and asked in a cold tone, "Try to answer the Lord Iton again." Then he began to smile and twist the dagger in his hand, adding, "What is your mistake?" The Lord said, "I apologize, Your Majesty." The girl stood in the crowd and did not understand where she was. Rumors whisper, "Can the Lord find the answer in 3 seconds?" "He must, otherwise it will be hanged as Baron Munyu." The servants whispered, and one of them asked to say quieter so that the king would not hear. The king threw a dagger towards the Lord with fury, stopping talking in the crowd. A wound appeared on the Lord's neck and blood poured. The Lord did not move, only closed his eyes. He looked at the pillow with the daggers of the king, stated, "That's why, only 3 daggers are left." In the midst of the game with bets, "I dared to block His Majesty," said the Lord. The Lord was proudly ready to accept the punishment of the king. Blood flowed from the wound on his neck. The girl thought, why did Lord Iton do this? If the road, life had to be quietly. In the crowd, it was said that covering the cost of a booze from the salary of knights will lead to ruin, and the king wounded the Lord daggers. Suddenly, the girl caught herself thinking and thought, some kind of familiar situation. Then the king directed the dagger towards the servants and said, "Well, let's see. Try you." Looking straight and coldly in the girl's eyes, the king said, naturally, she was very surprised at such a turn of events and asked, "What? I?" Carol continued to speak. "What did Lord Iton guilty of?" "Looking at the king," the girl thought. "A dagger, a bet, a drink, money, and a knight named Eden. Is this the plot of yesterday's short story?" The girl could not believe that she found herself in the novel that she read yesterday. She was an employee of a number of experience, with many years of experience, but her emotions dulled from sharp words of customers. She read the romantic stories that were the only joy in her life. The main character of the novel is the princess of a small country. She was brought as a concubine of the protagonist emperor. An uprising flashes in the climax of the novel, and the imperial palace does not withstand the onslaught. After that, the main character of the novel committed suicide right in front of the heroine. The princess did not believe what happened. She screamed not. The story ends sadly. The palace fell and the princess went crazy. The girl thought that if she got into the novel, then the man in front of her is the main character of the novel. Cardan Zeon is the ruler of the Hizrani Empire. His hair is black like a resin, a bloody iris. The ruler has a chiseled nose, like a chin, coated with a sculptor. The nature of a tyrant, mired in pleasures, and eliminated all advisors. That was the ruler. The ruler is cruel and ruthlessly punishes everyone who goes against him. He is so terrible, and at the same time so beautiful, that women cannot resist him. The girl recalls that reading the novel called him a beautiful villain. The girl could not believe what was happening and thought about it even more. Suddenly, the emperor made a tone of rude and asked if the girl was thinking about something else now. Naturally, the girl did not understand that she should answer the emperor and was a little confused. The emperor waited with anger and impatience, twisting a dagger in his hands, ready to strike. The girl understood that if now she did not give an answer that the emperor wants to hear, she could die. Therefore, she decided to agree with the emperor and said, "You are absolutely right, Your Highness." The emperor stared at the girl, but when he received the answer, he lowered his eyes. Then the emperor pulled a smile on his face and lowered the dagger. For the sake of winning the polo, he violated the rules and dared to take away the victory from His Majesty. The girl continued, "In the call center, it would be told to the emperor that the damage is not compensated. But now she considered the right man with a knife for an advantage." The expression of the emperor's face was strict and unperturbed, he thought. Suddenly, the emperor's face shone into a smile, and he said that only the girl understands him. The king asked if the death penalty will be worthy of punishment for the lord. At that moment, the girl thought that the emperor is not the same as those with whom she usually dealt. The girl understood that one of her words, and the knight could die. Therefore, she said that Eden really committed a serious crime. To begin with, she suggested that Eden experience pain for his deed, and the lord was shocked. The girl continued that Eden needs to be reduced from general guard to private. The girl thought that the loss of the post of general of the guard, deserved with great difficulty, would be worse for the lord. The emperor thought, but then replied that he would do so. The girl bowed and thought that everything ended well, and this somewhat reminiscent of work in the number of. The emperor said that his mood from the type of blood had deteriorated in the morning to earlier. The servants asked if it was possible to invite dancers from the south of the empire for the emperor. The emperor replied that he did not want to see the dancers and thought on. The servant proposed a masseur, but the emperor refused, and the servant said that there was no more to call. Suddenly, the emperor came a thought, and he turned into his shining smile to the servant. The emperor looked into the crowd and asked if no one is standing before him. The girl did not understand who the emperor was talking about, but she guessed that this person was clearly unlucky. The servants turned around and began to look at the girl intently. She was shocked. The girl until the last thought that the emperor was not turning to her. But alas, this was not so. After which the emperor called her Princess Irina Valoa, and the girl slowly stepped forward. The emperor looked at her intently and said that it was she who was the person he was talking about. At that very moment, the princess thought, "Why again I? Just do not contact him. If I contact the Kadan, then I will become a target for throwing daggers. I don't want to die." Therefore, she said that she would be happy to entertain the king, but doubted that she would satisfy his taste. The king did not expect such an answer, because before that everyone was drawn to him and performed his whims, so she thought. Finally, he said that he was confused from the answer, and he hears the refusal for the first time. The emperor suggested finishing the meeting, and the servants left the hall. The girl went out with the servants and stopped near the closed door of the hall. She exhaled in relief, rejoicing that she managed to get out of the hall so easily and avoid a deplorable fate. The girl thought, "Hooray, I survived." She was very proud of herself. Then, walking along the corridor, she thought, "It is generally humanly to move into someone's body during the meeting." She was just called Princess Valoa, and she thought, why would it? Stopping by the window, the girl thought about whether she was in her body. Looking at her reflection in glass windows, she realized that she had hit the body of that very princess. Irina Valoa, in the short story, was a villain, and although she rarely appeared, she often reassured the emperor. The girl thought that the duchess was very similar to her. He always smiles, even hearing unflattering words from customers. In the short story, Valoa opposed the order of the emperor for the main character to the greenhouse. After that, in the short story, she was executed for rebellion. The girl panicked. Why did she find himself in the body of the character who will die soon? She did not believe in what was happening, realizing that she could not just die. The girl remembered that in the short story, her heroine and the emperor rarely met, but only at work. Then why did the emperor say that she was the same person he was waiting for? The girl was thinking, is there really a secretive storyline in the short story, which she does not know about? Looking at her beautiful shoes, the girl decided that the information was not enough. Valoa decided to start finding out this world, and quickly ran to the open doors. The castle surrounded a huge yard and a garden with many fountains, trees, and a large territory. The princess went out into the garden and examined around in search of something interesting. She saw the courtyard of the castle, stairs, fountains, lanterns, and trees. She was interested in everything around. The girl was amazed at the beauty around and did not believe that it was really a world from fantasy. Suddenly, she saw a wounded knight and thought, was it really the person whom she had seen earlier in the hall of the emperor? The knight walked next to two other knights, not noticing anyone around. Eden felt that they were watching them, and with a lateral vision saw a beautiful girl. Suddenly, the men bowed at the same time and said, "Your Excellency!" The girl thought it was Lord Eden, and he took off the general tunic because of her words. The knights continued to bow with Lord Eden, lowering their eyes. The girl thought that, although it was a hopeless situation, it was still inconvenient for her before the Lord. Suddenly Eden said, "Thank you, Your Grace." The girl was very surprised at his words. Eden continued that if not for her, he would have already fallen at the hand of the emperor and did not talk to her now. He laid his hand on his heart and added that in non-payment duty to the princess. The girl was stunned. He took his position to which he went all his life, but he is grateful. She remembered that the duke is a tyrant and kills for the slightest claims. For example, for a tasteless drink. The girl's eyes filled sad because of the memories of the duke. She felt injustice. Eden was also sad because of what had happened, and was silent, his head bowed. The girl said that if he needs help, he could turn to her, and Eden was very surprised. His mouth opened in a slight smile, and from confusion from the words of the princess. Thinking a few moments, Eden said, "Thanks to the princess." After that, Eden with the knights went on, and the girl remained standing still thinking. Then she thought that Eden was not the character that appears only once and disappears. Suddenly, someone with a quick run began to approach the girl with words. "Princess Valoa, here you are." She turned around, not understanding what was happening and who was addressing her. She thought, "Your mightiness? Damn, it is me." And a maid appeared in front of her. The maid was looking for a duchess to try on an outfit for admission. The girl was surprised. An outfit for admission? The maid asked in bewilderment. Did she not ask her to prepare an outfit for the reception of the emperor and the monarchy spouses from Taraka? The princess was immediately stunned by such news. After all, she only moved to this body a couple of hours ago. She stood while the maid was crucified in front of her because she was recently in the call center, and now she went to the diplomatic reception. The maid asked about the problems, what the girl answered with a laugh. "No, no problems. You forgot everything," the king said. Valoa did not understand what he was talking about. Then he realized that he was betraying himself by behavior. Now is not the time to inspect the palace, Countess scolded herself. At any moment, an official reception will take place. Valoa asked the maid whether dinner began. She answered, "It remains half a day, and a suit with trousers is in the office." The maid froze in bewilderment, and the countess repeated aloud, "Another half a day, fine. Then you will not show where my office is." I gladly asked Valoa, a servant. Valoa blushed into her office, thinking, "This time I was able to get out. But where is the guarantee that I was lucky next time?" The girl began to quickly sort out the papers on her table, not understanding what was happening. She tried to find at least some clue, to survive with a tyrant who ruined the empire in 5 years. It seemed to the girl impossible, but she decided to pull herself together and deal with the princess's business. She has a personal space in the palace. In the original novel, the girl noticed a special attitude to Valoa. The countess understood that if she received useful information, it will be possible to avoid death at the hands of the possessor. Among the documents, the countess found on one of the sheets some strange code. Valoa did not believe that this is possible. The numbers on the sheet are an estimate of the expenses of the imperial family. The imperial family has almost no means of existence. The family is on the verge of ruin. The pigeon sitting in a cage watched the duchess and knocked with his beak. The bird wanted freedom. The duchess plunged into the thoughts of further actions and did not hear the poultry of the bird on the cage. She is waiting for the same fate as Princess Valoa. If, with such an empty treasury, the emperor will require the construction of another villa. The girl understood that in this situation, she would die faster than the princess, who was executed in the 1000th year from the founding of the empire. She was in despair, realizing that her experience in the call center is useless here. The countess did not believe. Is such an absurd death awaiting her? She didn't just want to come to terms with this. To survive, she must replenish the state treasury. Then the king will be pleased with his inconspicuous wealth. Surrender money for asylum and escape before the empire collapses. It was the perfect plan for Countess. The girl changed her clothes for a diplomatic meeting and decided to discard all doubts. To discard all doubts, it will bring to life all the dreams and desires of the tyrant and will become an indispensable servant. I decided Valoa for myself. Meanwhile, Carol and Queen Taraki arrived in the castle, a country located next to the Hisrani Empire. The king and Queen Taraki asked for a personal audience with your majesty. Therefore, they were very surprised by the appearance of Valoa. The girl was outraged by such a reaction of the guests to her appearance. She began to talk in high colors. The countess ran a hand over the table, looked at the dishes, and stated, "If she had not been here, who would taste the king's dishes?" The words of Valoa became a shock for the duke, and he was silent, being confused. The king and Queen Taraki were no less than the king are surprised by the response of the duchess. They did not meet this anywhere. The girl decided that her plan worked for everyone as it should, and smiled sweetly, feeling embarrassed. King Taraki was surprised and outraged by the reaction of the countess. "What is this reaction?" The girl clarified. "Didn't I say something? I thought that she was the faithful dog of Cardan. To protect yourself, dogs bark." The girl wanted to snap, but stopped in time. The countess asked, "Does King Tarak consider the poisoning of His Majesty insignificant, and whether he is ready to be responsible for his words?" The king of Taraka was afraid of the duke's reaction and began to make excuses that he did not mean this. The girl with sarcasm said, "Of course the king did not mean this. I thought, since they came to this, I decided to get a little." She laid her hand on her heart, leaning toward the king. This is what she has in mind. Allow Her Majesty to show respect for him, allowing her to check his food. The countess continued in bow. The duke was silent and pondered the offer of the countess. He considered Wallowa's proposal strange. He looked at the plate with food, thought about devotion, and told the girl that she could begin. The girl was surprised that the duke agreed to her offer. She did not expect consent. The king smiled, thought, and noticed. However, but he fell silent again, formulating the thought. Cardan continued to speak. "If the countess tastes dishes in which poison, this will still cause inconvenience," she thought. Amazing! She smiled from her thoughts and memories of what she knew from the plot. Until he became the emperor, he distinguished himself in conquering wars and was known as one of the best swordsmen. The girl began to eat the duke, thinking, poisoning threatens the Cardan only with a disorder of the stomach. For her, everything will end with an ambulance. The interior in the dining room was at the same time romantic and business. Paintings hung on the walls, and candelabra with candles were placed across the hall. The girl wiped her mouth with a napkin. She listened to her inner feelings, whether she becomes bad from food. King Taraka froze in anticipation. What will happen next with Countess Wallowa? What to do if she becomes bad? The girl got up and smiling said to the Cardan, "Everything is in order with his food. He can start a meal." The girl hid her hands behind her. She felt trembling from excitement in the whole situation that was happening. Valo mentally praised herself for work, but immediately pulled. She is squeezed like a lemon. It is unlikely that someone will want to poison a person whom the poison does not take. The girl doubted that food was dangerous. Having bowed, the girl said, "It is a great honor for her to be useful to your majesty." The duke said with a smile, "Thanks to her zealous work, he can now begin to start a meal without fears." However, the girl froze, waiting for a new instruction of the king. What will he come up with this time? The duke laid his hand on the table knife and tapped it with his finger. It looks like he was thinking what an indication to give the countess. King Taraka and the girl were surprised. It seemed to them that the duke would now throw a knife right at one of them. The duke noticed the expectation of Valoa and the king and continued, "Cut the steak is so tiring." The girl was in shock and understood that she needed to act immediately to satisfy the Cardan. The duke leaned back in an armchair, waiting for a chopped steak and watching the actions of the countess. The duke closely followed what was happening. When will his dish be in front of him? If the tyrant is momentarily not to please, it will die with a probability of 100%. In a hurry, the girl took the plate with food by King Taraka. Valoa turned to the guest, so that he forgave her and entered her position. The king was struck by behavior, and the countess was very ashamed. The steak in the plate of King Taraka was cut. The girl put a dish in front of the Cardan. The king noted, "The steak is perfectly cut. It is convenient to eat, but here, hot." The girl, standing behind the guests, realized that it was necessary to act further and guess the tyrant. She grabbed a fan from the queen's hands, who immediately froze in confusion. The girl screamed, so that the duchess immediately opened the windows so that the Duke would not be so hot. Valoa began actively waved a fan near the king, giving instructions. Open all the windows immediately. His Majesty is stuffy. The Duchess was silent, wondering what was happening. She wanted to take her fan from the Duchess. The King and Queen Taraka were upset by this technique, and the girl, on the contrary, was happy about her actions and continued to wave the fan. The girl with a smile and bowed. So better, Your Majesty? Are you comfortable now? The king answered strictly. From the fan carries disgusting spirits. He barely restrained himself so as not to blink his nose. Cardan ordered the girl, Stop, swing a fan. She stopped, pleased with herself. Valoa threw the fan out the window. The most reasonable solution is to throw it away. The countess stood by the open window and thought, It is necessary to get rid of everything that acts a tyrant on the nerves. Queen Taraka was shocked. The king asked her to sit down. The fan belonged to the deceased mother of the queen. The girl thought, how to get out of this situation? She was happy and embarrassed at the same time. The king viciously looked around. His gaze pierced the back of the countess and all those present. He stated, looking towards the statue that stood in the corner of the hall, That statue is too dazzling. The girl darted to the statue and said with complete confidence, Understood. I was about to move it out of place. She will move her right now. Valoa shouted to the queen, I will return to your problem as soon as I fulfill my duty. All those sitting at the table turned to the girl to see how she could cope. Not worth it, the king said. He added, The statue needs to be contemplated. It fits perfectly into the interior of the hall. However, the king noted, from the head of the statue, ripples in the eyes. The girl was shocked by his words. She is ashamed of her actions. She is unable to change something, reached a point of no return, to solve the problem without harming the beauty of the statue of an angel. With determination, she went to King Taraka and touched his head. She pulled the king's hair and took off her wig. The queen was horrified by what was happening. The countess went to the statue with the king's wig in her hands. She was ashamed to turn into guest. Wearing a wig on the statue, Waloa was able to cover the shining head. The statue looked unusual. King Taraka remained to sit bald and in complete shock. He did not expect someone to guess about his wig. Suddenly, the king folded his hands for applause. He began to applaud. Cardan noted, The angel has become even more beautiful. As expected, Princess Valoa has a sophisticated taste. The king leaned toward the girl and whispered, However, now there are other places that reflect the light. He hoped that they would be decorated. King Taraka in horror turned to the king and the duchess. He realized that we were talking about his bald head. The girl was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The king's decrees drove her crazy. Meanwhile, a beautiful pink sunset has spread over the castle. A warm spring evening has come. King Taraka coughed and began to speak. As he previously reported in the letter, relations with neighboring countries are not stable. The king listened carefully to him, postponing food. But his appearance spoke of the opposite. The guest continued. Due to the heightened conflict in the border zone, a slight but still damage was caused. King Taraka, wrapping his head with a stream, asked, What is the opinion of Vage Majesty about what is happening? The girl believed that guests tolerate humiliation for the sake of proposal to Cardan to become an intermediary in the conflict. King Taraka told the king, Do not rush to answer. He hoped for the help of His Majesty. The guest continued, This question deserves attention. The kingdom of Esland borders on the empire of Hisronia. The girl thought, The kingdom of Esland is the country which will lead the empire to collapse. The king said after a long silence, The next spring will take place a banquet. The girl was surprised at his words. She thought he would answer the case. Cardan thought what to say next. Cardan continued, Organize a meeting there. Discuss in a friendly environment. The guests did not understand what he was talking about. A fruitful conversation will eliminate any misunderstanding, the king said with a grin. The girl, watching him, thought. I clung to one phrase. Banquet next spring. What to do? In the novel, it was called a grand banquet. It is not by chance that the Cardan will meet with the main character. Thoughts about the plot of the novels plunged the countess into shock. She got up from the table. The king noticed this and asked, Countess, something is wrong. He thought she felt bad from food. The girl, resting her hands on the table, said decisively. Number, she did not want to give a look that something else was bothering. As for the banquet, she wanted to note the foresight of the king. She will work in the sweat of her face so that the whole world finds out about him. The girl thought bitterly. From the moment of the Cardin meeting with the heroine, the countdown will begin to my execution. It should hold out until next spring. The countess decided to apologize to the king and Queen Taraka, and after the meeting caught up with them in the corridor of the palace. She handed the box with the queen's fan and the king of the king. She was very ashamed of her actions. The king looked angrily at the girl. He did not understand where she got these things. Take it! Valoa lowered her head and cried. A sense of shame took possession of it. The king put on his wig, and he and the queen moved to the exit of the castle. They heard in the back, I'm sorry. For random circumstances, I ruined such a valuable thing. She is very sorry that she disturbed your majesty. Because of her, Taraka can unite with Esland and declare war, so she is obliged to prevent it, forgetting about pride. The girl, using the working phrase, turned to the king and the queen. If you have concrete wishes, please tell. The king and the queen thought about the office of the countess. They did not think that she would cross through her pride. The guest said, If such a king's will has a question. The girl bowed. Ask anything. The king hesitated, but continued. There are thoughts about the expansion of our silk industry in Taraka. Vaola shone with the hope of saving the empire, and herself answered. Yes, Tarakansky silk is well known to her. It was he who was used every time to sew dresses, the main character of the novel. The countess asked, Why expand a prosperous business? The king answered, He understands how it will be painful for the emperor. The material is not very well known or verified. The king continued. The girl was shocked by such a statement. The expansion of production and strengthening of trade will make Taraka more, and will cause respect even to Island. He planned to supply goods at cost. The girl thought, This is brilliant. Valoa had eye-corned. This is a big catch. Thus, she can the treasury of the empire, and escape to its collapse. The girl grabbed the king by the hand and squeezed her in a strong handshake, concluding a deal. It will not be easy, but for our dear king, she will do everything possible. The guests thanked her and left the castle. Valoa decided that even if she was cut off with her eyes closed, comfort is above all. If you know the story of the novels, to manage events in the castle so easy. The evening fell to the castle. A little later, the girl in her office leafed through the notebook with the countess's affairs. Suddenly, someone entered the office and, closing the notebook, took it from the girl's hands. It was the king. Unfolding the notebook and looking at the records, he said, Work is still perfect. While the king was concentrated on papers, the countess thought that, although she knew the plot, does not know what to do. Valoa did not understand why Cardin came to her office, and shifting the papers folded by her all night. The king slyly looked at the girl. However, he began. After all, I did not just get through the papers. Cardin gently hit her head on her head. Valoa was in suspense, anticipating some kind of catch. The king suddenly turned around, as if he was about to leave, and asked, Why did she save the Lord's city? Cardin continued, It was the countess who gave him such an order to kill the Lord. His words shocked the girl. She could not believe that she could give such an order. I asked. First, the king continued, the dog with whom she managed moved to the Dowager Empress, so he had to be eliminated. Why the Empress appeared so early? She will show herself in the second part, when she transfers secret information to Island. Cardin told the Empress, Come up with a reason that will allow this situation, but do not help it again. The king said, Doesn't the girl think that he is running everywhere to fulfill her request? Cardin, touching her face, said, I am sure that Valoa will make the right decision, but she will also think about him. The king said, The more he watches the countess, the more he is convinced of her disgust, and the contract is too much. The girl was surprised by the words of the emperor. She recognized more and more new things. The plot was changed. The emperor spoke of a contract that was not in the short story, and the girl was perplexed. What is about? Valoa understood that this was important information, and this could help her implement the original plan. But now, from the contemptuous gaze of the Cardin, the head is empty like a clean sheet. Due to stupid numbness, her head can fly off her shoulders. She decides to bow and apologizes to the king. Now she will get rid of everything that annoys the cardan. She opens the window and stands on the windowsill to jump. The girl's thoughts were, "There is also a soft lawn. I won't die from the fall. I will get off with bruises. It is worth taking a chance." The girl jumps down with the thought that she would sacrifice herself to please the tyrant. Suddenly, the girl is enough for clothes at the last moment. This act is shocking Valoa. The girl lands on the floor in full shock. She hid a little from falling to the floor, but she remained alive and whole. The king answers, "Enough the contract first." His gaze is very harsh, and Valo's act did not surprise him, but only annoyed him. Cardan was going to please in the end, saying, "Then jump as much as you want." The girl decided to review old papers. According to Cardan, Princess Valoa entered into a contract with him. The princess possessed such a force that she could dispose of the Eden and keep the Dowager Empress under her control. The girl understood, if she is caught, that she is not a real participant in the contract. She learns about new types of execution. Based on papers on the table, she finds out more and more about Princess Valoa. The report under the codename Assistance to the Emperor contained information about all the movements of the Emperor. Now the girl understands why Cardan looked at her like that. All the same, the real tyrant is not him, but she. The knight sank to the castle. He hid many secrets about every hero of the novel, as if in confirmation of the hidden powerfulness of the princess. In the office, the girl found some strange objects. A book called The Leadership of Pigeons among working documents. In the drawer of the table with a double bottom, the girl found a portrait and a book about poisonous herbs. Judging because the portrait and the book were hidden, it seems somehow connected with the contract. Valoa thought. The girl looked at the portrait that she found, and the girl in the photo seemed very familiar to her. Why the girl in the portrait looks as if he had hung up anger at her. With these thoughts, Valoa threw a portrait to the floor. The girl blamed herself for her impulse of anger. To whom such thoughts will come to mind? A maid entered the office and said, "I apologize, princess. Your dinner." The maid set a table for one person and said, "Pleasant meal?" Exactly! The table setting seemed to the girl quite familiar. She saw her somewhere recently. The countess grabbed the book. The table is exactly the same as described in the book on feeding pigeons. On the table stood the main dish, a snack and dessert. Everything looked very tasty and appetizing. The girl was thinking about what was happening. She felt something wrong here. Why all this? The girl looked at the cages with pigeons and thought, still, the time of dinner. Can try to feed them. The countess decides to feed the pigeons, as described in the book. She handed the leaf of salad for a pigeon. He began to eat. 3 of 4 pigeons are given snacks, the main dish and dessert. The 4th is starving. The girl apologized to the 4 and promised to feed her next time. Valoa thought, we all have to work to earn our bread. Suddenly, the girl saw the pigeon one on the floor. Blood flowed from the beak. The bird was dying. The girl raised the bird. The unit immediately coughed with blood and fell. Valoa could not believe what was happening. The bird was dying in the arms of a girl. She lost her strength with every minute. The reason that Princess Valoa divided the food between the pigeons was to recognize the poison. In addition, a cough with blood and a sweet smell of salad. Everything is exactly as described in the book about poisonous plants. But even despite the fact that everything is described in the book in detail, there is no name for the poison itself, not the words about antidote. Even if there was an antidote, the only method of combating poison, adding it to food to develop stability. The princess tried to increase her resistance to poison, although she found a way. The small pigeon cannot do this. The girl was horrified to realize that there was nothing to help the unit. The princess chose a too cruel way to identify poison. She went to cells with pigeons. Sorry, regretfully said Valoa. There was a dead bird in her hands, and the girl promised to bury her in a sunny place. The girl looked at the dishes on the table and decided that she could not allow the birds to die further. The girl looked at the salad and understood. It remains to use the arena method, and she has no choice. Who wants to poison her? The emperor who has a disgust or the dowager empress? The girl decided to start with Eden, considering him a weak adversary, and went to his office. Such an expression on the face, as if the Lord does not understand why she is here. The princess expected another reaction. The Lord said he was getting used to his position. This is better than guillotine. The Countess thought he was pretending. Eden thanked the Duchess for his salvation and bowed. He sincerely did not understand why she came to him. The girl calmly turned away from the Lord and realized that he knew nothing. The marioner dog can go over to the side of the Dowager Empress, will then have to get rid of him. Valoa handed the basket to Edan with the words, "You have not yet recovered from wounds. You need to take care of your health." The Lord did not understand what the Countess is talking about. She took out a salad from the basket that had previously fed pigeons. The girl looked with a malicious grin at the Edan. In her head was a tricky plan for checking the Lord. She handed the plate to the Lord. After the maid found out about his work on the princess, he thought she would get rid of him. She saved him from the king and cares about his health. The Lord thanked the princess and will no longer repeat such a mistake. The girl thought, why the Duchess tried to kill her subordinate in this way. Eden decides to try the salad that the Duchess brought. Valoa is shocked by the naivety of the Lord. He will try it with pleasure. The Duchess is in shock why the poison does not affect the Lord. The girl looked angrily at the Eden and decided to take a plate from him. She rushed to him, trying to knock out a plate out of her hands. How it can be so easy to eat. She just rushed him in the garden nearby. "You are fine," the Lord said. "Excuse me." He was so happy, so he hurried to eat a salad. Eden said with a smile, "Now he is better. The main thing is not to forget carefully, chew." If he tried to poison her, he would not have so carelessly try the food that she brought him. The girl decided that Lord Iton was not guilty. She left the office and went out into the corridor, thought, who to check further? Only in vain spent time. If it was not Eton, then who wants to kill her? She thought. The girl began to think that perhaps Cardan planned this. But why is he so risk? Valoa is shocking her assumption. She cannot believe that Cardan is capable of this. At this time, the raven is watching the girl. She, thinking, goes to her office, deciding not to rush with conclusions. It is true that between Valoa and the emperor is a difficult relationship, but there are many other political opponents. The Countess begins dizziness. She does not understand what kind of dull is happening to her. She thought, do not be afraid to eat a little more, but you need to take into account immunity to poison and count your strength. It is impossible to fall right in the middle of the corridor, but she is still bad and dizzy. A Cardan manifests itself in front of Valoa. There is no choice, he says. But the girl does not hear his words. Valoa loses consciousness and falls directly into the hands of the Cardan. The king catches her. He does not understand why the Countess is bad. The girl comes to her senses for a moment, and seeing the king thinks, why is he here? Cardan holds a dagger in his hands and looks closely at the girl. He is silent and nothing says. She thinks if Cardan wants to kill her now, but he supports her by the waist so that Valoa does not fall. There is no one next to them. They are completely alone. Now the ideal moment is for the king to make the plan. The girl recalls that she saw a raven, and this is a sign of the omen of death. The king took the girl in his arms. She can go herself what he does. Why he took her in his arms. Cardan asks to behave calmer and not twitch. The girl thinks, one movement and she will end. The king carries a girl in her arms. The forces leave her, and the girl falls asleep right in his arms. Valoa woke up in her office. Her head was terribly ill. The king noticed. She quickly came to her senses. The girl noticed that she was in her office. She wanted to object to the king, but did not talk. The king realized that the Countess wanted to say, and answered the lead. That is, she wants to say that she should not be accompanied. This confidence, because she has not even woken up to the end. The king began eating salad. Cardan enjoyed the salad. It was evident that this dish was to his taste. The girl watched what was happening in shock. After all, there was poison in the salad. Why does he not act on him? Here is a psycho. Why is it? If you eat so much, it will be dangerous even for the best swordsman. Suddenly, the king stood up and threw the fork towards Valoa. Cheap taste. Cardan approached the girl and said, well, now that's enough to pretend. She did not understand what was happening. What does his look mean? Why does he look at me so viciously? Cardan knows about something or suspects the Countess. Does he really know about the method of Princess Valoa to develop immunity to poison? The girl could not understand what was in the king's thoughts. Earlier, the king was walking around the garden. It was night and the garden was empty. He was looking for an opportunity to enjoy silence. Suddenly, the raven flew up to the cardan and landed on his shoulder. This did not surprise the king. He was waiting for a bird. He asked for a bird. "You carefully watch Valoa." The bird croaked in response. The king saw that the bird was something like a letter in its beak. He ordered him to quit the bird, threw the letter to the ground. "What is it?" The king turned the letter with interest. He slowly read the contents. The Dowager Empress invited the princess to her palace. The letter turned out to be an invitation. The Dowager Princess was insidious, and the king ordered the crow to follow. Will Valoa accept the invitation of the princess? What a man in the past would not be Valoa? It is time to deal with her, the king thought. Valoa accepted the invitation of the princess and recovered to her castle. A lot of roses grew around. The castle was very beautiful. "Thank you for the invitation of your majesty," Valoa said. She put on her best outfit for an honorary visit. "Welcome, princess," the princess answered, who was sitting on the throne in her hall for receptions. She is so glad that the countess came. Valoa has not been to her palace for so long. The princess is glad to see her. This woman, Dowager Empress Hisronia, is Amelia Eslin. The girl remembered the plot of the novel. Not being the biological mother of Cardan, in the original, the Empress was not a key character. Valoa decided to reveal to Princess Amelia, despite her harmlessness. She decides to come up with a plan. Amelia got up to greet Valoa properly. The girl did not understand what the princess wanted to do. All fingers except the big is directed up. "Welcome, Eslin gesture." In the novel, this gesture was mentioned several times. The heroine, who extended her hand in Eselane, was immediately imprisoned. Suddenly, seeing this gesture live, Valoa fully realized that she had occupied someone else's body. The princess said she had prepared tea. The girl thought if she would try to send her a delightful aroma. The princess asked the countess, "Is it really so busy that it is so rare to visit?" Amelia apologized for tactlessness. She was frustrated by Valoa's refusals due to employment. The records said that the princess really constantly sent invitations to the princess. A servant approached the princess, and she instructed her ear. The girl thought that the woman looked suspicious. Valoa decides to check the princess's servant. Does she really want to get closer to the widow, or pretending? The countess said, "Come an empty hand with an empty hand. I have a gift for you." Irina said that Amelia did not refuse. It was tea from Merce's flowers. The princess noted, "Maurice is a special flower. Isn't it better for tea to use fragrant herbs? Flowers with a strong aroma are good," the countess noted, "but it prefers notes of mercury. Unlike roots, the flowers are not poisonous, and they can be eaten without fear." The countess noticed that the maid carefully helped her with the preparation of tea. The servant behaved strangely. It was evident that the girl was worried, afraid to do something wrong. Valoa noticed it. The princess noted that the maid is reliable, and the countess will be satisfied with her skills. The girl bowed embarrassedly. Valoa suspected the maid in poisoning, but decided not to interrogate her, fearing the leakage of the information. "Hurry up and fill the cup of the Dowager Empress." "The countess," said the maid. The girl took the kettle, but immediately knocked it on the table. All the tea was sprayed in different directions. The girl bowed and began to apologize. The countess was outraged not by the accuracy of the servants, it alerted her. The princess was worried. Is everything all right with Valoa? Whether the hot tea burned her? The countess reassured her. The tea has already cooled down. She was banging, but not injured. She was going to leave to change clothes for the upcoming meeting. The eldest maid behind the princess looked angrily at her subordinate, who poured tea. The girl bowed once again, apologizing. She poured tea by accident. Everyone looked after Valoa, and she felt their eyes with her back. Of course, they blame her in everything, the countess thought. She is sure that this princess bribed the maid to add poison to her. Why is it a princess? The girl thought. She called out and she turned around. The princess said, "If she has difficulties for the countess to come at any time, and did not trust the emperor, it is difficult for her to understand what the princess is thinking. Why the princess restrained her? Rather, she will die from poisoning than from execution." She decides to look after the Dowager Empress. The next day, at night, Valoa in the garden watched the cardan and servant of Amelia from behind the bushes. The girl did not understand what was happening. Why did the count come to the servant secretly in the garden? Cardan looked at the girl in love. He seemed to be going to kiss her. Is this not an empress who doused her with tea? Why is she alone with a cardan late at night? The girl could not understand what was happening around. Thoughts were confused in her head, and it seemed to her that she was going crazy. If you think about the girl from the portrait, which she found in the drawer of the table in her office, and this servant's are the same hair. Cardan preferred girls with chestnut hair. He was once not deprived of female attention. The countess thought that the cardan had similar preferences, but still what they do in the garden in the middle of the night together. Different thoughts arose in the countess's head. She continued to watch the strange pair of the king and the servants. What if it is a cardan tries to send it? What if it was he who ordered this girl to add poison into Valoa's food? The girl shuddered with her whole body. She could not believe what it was. The countess tore off the leaflet from the bush, because of which she followed and decided. She urgently needs to leave the palace. The next day, the count in his office, lying on the sofa, looked through different papers. The countess came in. She stated that she was going on a trip to find out how things are in the empire. The count answered, "Dare. The state core is empty every day, and it must find the reason for this." The count was as if read her thoughts. "Tell the truth. You are leaving for money." He believed that she was obsessed with money. Valoa noted, "The graph has insight. Does this mean that the treasury and her money too?" She wanted to run away now, but does not know the country and its orders at all. Therefore, I decided to leave this idea. It is better to calculate everything in advance. The king is worthy of exceptional luxury, inaccessible to other monarchs. During the trip, she will tell everyone and everyone how much the king does for the empire. The countess promised that, having a king, she would go down in history. Everyone will learn about his generosity. Cardan asked, "About generosity?" He did not understand what the countess was driving at. The girl noticed that the atmosphere in the hall changed and did not understand that she did not suit the king. Cardan stared at the girl. "It will be very good," he finally said. She was mistaken. He thought that the countess was mocking him. The girl strained. The girl must settle a misunderstanding before the king loses his temper. Cardan is already a fair ruler, but she wants to spread this opinion among his subjects. Cardan got up from the couch to approach Valoa. He did it very slowly and reluctantly. The king approached, and taking the chin to the chin. He looked intently into his eyes and said, "Go." The girl was glad of such a reaction of Cardan. She bowed in gratitude. The emperor continued, "If she wants, then let her do as she wants." The girl looked directly into the eyes of the emperor. She waited for him to tell her. Cardan came closer to let her go. Said, "Usually she does so, acting at her discretion." Cardan watched what was happening from the window of his office. Where the countess will recover, he did not know. He remembered yesterday's night in the garden with the servant of Princess Amelie. Then something distracted him, and he turned back. The girl noticed this and asked, "Is everything all right? Is the maid really tried to get rid of the princess?" The girl replied that she was ready for anything for the king. The girl looked at Cardan with devotion. It was evident that she was in love with him. He ordered to convey to the Dowager Empress that the life of the princess belongs to him. The prince thought alone. He wanted to follow the princess, but did not know how. Suddenly, behind the cardan, appeared his faithful servant, Raven. The king thought this was a good idea. The emperor released the bird out the window. I had previously instructed what to do a crow. Cardan was angry that Valoa let go. The raven flew right in the wake of the carriage. He flew quickly, but not high, to see well what was happening below. The countess left the carriage. She was met by the footman and helped to go out. The raven, meanwhile, caught up with them and watched from the sky. Valoa arrived in paradise. A huge farm with a garden and a mill was opened in front of her. The servant, the garden manager told, "Buzina grows here, that field of gooseberries." The countess noted that there are many berries. The guy was called Han Hill. He controlled the lands. The princess said that she had no complaints. She only expressed admiration. According to the reaction of Hanya, it is not difficult to imagine what was the princess, the evil right hand of the tyrant. The princess was amused with a rabbit. Valoa decided to change everything. She noted that Hani is very entrepreneurial, since he was able to master such barren lands. The baron answered, "He was just lucky." The princess said, "He can be proud of himself. He managed to grow a rich crop." Hanya was shocked by such a conversationalism and kindness of the princess. She usually behaves differently. The baron continued, "They want to plant blueberries this year. It turns out a very tasty jam from it is the same blueberry from the short story." The girl realized with surprise. Baron's speech attracted her attention. There were only a few scenes of food for the main character in the novel. In one of the scenes, the king was angry. The king's eyes burned with hatred. Really, because of some crop failure of the emperor, he will not be able to taste blueberries. Valoa was horrified by the memories of the fact that later, in the short story, the baron was executed due to the crop failure of the very blueberry. Hanya invited the countess to take strawberries with him on the road. He was so naive. He is completely a boy who has only berries on his mind. The girl decides to unite with the baron. The countess came up with a plan for how to save Baron Hania. When he leaves for the seedlings, let him in no hurry to return. The baron asked, "Why?" The girl thought but did not say, "You are executed next year." Valoa said that she was also going to go on a trip next year and suggested that the hero go together. The raven, meanwhile, watched what was happening. He was very invisible. No one saw him. He quickly flew towards the castle to report the news that he managed to hear. The king. The raven flew in and knocked on the beak in the window of the chambers where the cardin was. He heard a knock and opened the window. The bird quickly stumbled into the open window and sat on the table. Cardan was looking forward to the news. The raven retold to the king of the news. So between the baron and the princess are such conversations. Cardan summed up. He sent a raven for information, but he brought only gossip, and discussing travels at such a time seemed strange. Is the countess going on a trip with her lover? Cardan got up and went to the window throwing his mantle. Even if she decided to leave, it is necessary to comply with the contract. Cardan decides to follow her himself. Morning came in paradise. The sun shone brightly. The weather was pleasant. Hanya saw the princess in the courtyard, which gave instructions to the servant. The baron asked how she slept. The girl lied in a smile. She is the premise of grateful to baron for the concern of her person. In fact, all night she checked the consumable books of the paradise and did not close her eye. Lord Iton, who went with the princess, probably also did not sleep well, but looked like nothing had happened. How he could secretly follow the order to steal documents without even saying a word. Valoa looked after the lord and noticed that even for the baron it would not be easy. The lord felt the eyes of the countess and decided to come closer to her. He turned into a smile. The girl was taken by surprise. She did not expect Iton to approach her. The embarrassment covered her. What he creates, her heart goes into heels. She did not understand why she had such a reaction to the lord. The girl caught a strange smell in the air. He was very unpleasant. The girl realized that the river smells like that. Baron asked for forgiveness, saying that recently they had problems with the quality of water. The river was black. What happened to the river? Within the end of the Marquise of Sherrington, wastewater continues to enter. The baron continued that everything is in order, though prolific trees were wound next to the river. You need to solve the problem. She looked into Hanya's eyes. This is not normal. Are these trees not valuable for guests and for the baron himself? He is his servant, the prime minister of this state, and asked Hanya not to worry. Valoa will show the paradise a bright future with fruit trees. Meanwhile, the king reached the estate and watched with a raven on a tree for Valoa and Hanya. Cardan told the crow that he was mistaken. This is not love, it is just touching him. The king thought. If the princess fell in love, she would have a completely different expression on her face. He knew her gaze in love when she told him that it would help to become an outstanding ruler. Cardan thought that then was happening between the baron and the princess. What they planned if this is not love. Meanwhile, Valoa went to the Marquis Sherrington on a visit to solve the problem with the river near the Paradise Garden. Marquis Sherrington met the princess very honorable and said, so that she does not hesitate and proceed to the meal. They sat in a large dining room at a long table opposite each other. Near each there were many dishes. There are many different dishes on the table, but meat can be counted on the fingers, the princess noted. The marquis is dressed from a needle, and therefore his calculated books look very strange, Wallowa thought. The girl decides to catch the marquis on the hot and asks, "How are you with the estate lately?" Because of the crop failures, he is ashamed to collect taxes, but the countess noticed that everything was in order in the next estate. The answer was interested in the marquis. Does it really mean a paradise estate? There, fruit trees grow very well along the river. The girl decides to offer a deal to the marquis. What does he think about the monopolization of the berry business? The girl saw that the marquis was angry. We are talking about berry crops that require a lot of water, from where the harrow was given to get it, noticed the marquis. The marquis became furious. It cannot be that the baron uses water from its river. Did he really take the river into his own hands? She can solve the problem of Sherrington. Since the berry business flourishes thanks to his water, the profit is also it. The girl with a grin stated that in truth, she had one idea how to help both monarchs. The construction of the dam will be able to solve the problem of both lands, the princess said. The baron will not be able to grow berries on its land, and the marquis will achieve business prosperity thanks to the dam. She tells Sherrington to think well. The construction of the dam is too expensive, whether it can cover all expenses. The marquis was clearly embarrassed by such a statement by the princess and thought about the answer. Apparently, his treasury was not too complete. The imperial family will help financially if the marquis provides the necessary documents, tax returns, income certificates, a list of property, detailing of all transactions. The marquis brought all the documents of Wallowa. Now the territory is not the most favorable situation, the marquis said. Wallowa said, "Maybe this is because the marquis keeps money abroad, and this shocked it." Eton handed over the book of accounting, which he previously stole from the Sherrington safe. The marquis was surprised where the princess had this book. After all, she was in his safe. Huge foreign investments, the activities of an illegal gambling house, a profit transferred to Esland. What will happen to the marquis when the king learns about all this? Sherrington began to bow to Molia about mercy. She will cover all the expenses for construction, but he will have to pay tax debt, only half. In return, the countess wants the marquis to give her all funds transferred to Esland. Then she will bring everything to the end. With these words, the princess went to the carriage drawn by horses, went to travel further. Sitting in a carriage, the girl thought that she was replenishing the state treasury and collects money for her escape. She hoped that everything would also be smooth further. There was nothing to foresee trouble. Suddenly, the carriage was greatly brought, and the girl began to shake all over the carriage in different directions. She did not understand what was happening. The carriage stopped, and the servant said, "Further, the road is uneven, and it will be difficult to drive on a carriage." The countess asked. "There are also options for what you can drive," the servant said. "I brought you a horse. I chose the obedient. I hope you will like it," the servant continued. He crushed a brown horse. In appearance, she was obedient. She turned to the servant in indignation. Like her, a 21st century man should take a horse. Is there really no way? The servant continued that the countess has been riding since childhood. He has not seen her in the saddle for a long time. The countess thought, "Damn." Despite nothing, the girl deftly jumped into the horse's saddle. The horse did not understand what happened. The girl was surprised at her skills. Does she really have the muscle memory of the heroine of the novel? Not everything is so bad. Suddenly, the horse fell sharply and threw the princess up. Wallowa was frightened and grabbed tightly behind the horse's depth. The servants wanted to stop the horse, but it was too late. He rushed to the princess at high speed on the road further. The girl understood that something was wrong with the horse. She tried to stop her, but did not work. Someone gave a horse medicine. What to do to the princess? It was necessary to stop all this. Suddenly, a man in the mantle also appeared nearby on a horse. He tried to catch up with the princess's horse to stop. The man overtook the horse of the countess. He grabbed her by the reins, stopping. He understood that Wallowa could die. The man asked, "You are fine. Do not let go of the reins, no matter how scary." He got down from his horse and gave a hand to the countess so that she safely got off the horse. A raven sitting on a tree branch, the faithful servant of Cardan. He watched the dressed king and countess. Valoa told the stranger. Thanks to you, I remained alive. Could you introduce myself? There is no gratitude, the stranger said. I passed by, saw that you had problems, and decided to help. Cardan handed a piece of bloodied glass to the countess. It was he who caused an accident. The countess took the glass in her hand and thought, this is not an accident. Someone tried to kill her. Meanwhile, the servants ripened with screams. They worried about Valoa and for the fact that they could not stop the horse. The princess answered, pointing to the stranger. Thanks to this person, everything is in order with me. The servants wanted to take the blame on themselves. The princess said, no one is to blame. The horse did not listen to her. The girl showed a fragment of bloodied glass Cardan. He was shocked. Cardan took off his jacket and threw Valoa over his shoulders. He suggested spreading the camp. After short thoughts, the girl agreed. Today, everyone needs to rest. Looking at the fragment in the tent, the countess noticed. It is cut to attach to the saddle. Someone from the near environment wants to kill her. Who acts according to its graphics? But who? Sitting in pitch darkness, the countess thought. She ran away from the killer from the royal family. It seems to be in vain. The countess thought all night. In the morning, the pigeons in her cells rummaged, but she never found the answer. The girl went to the cells to see why the pigeons were rummaged. Suddenly, Valoa saw that someone was approaching her. She was very scared. It was Lord Iton in his hands. He held his sword and waved to strike. The countess dodged the blow and asked, what's happening? She was very angry. Outside, she found that there was no one nearby and began to run in search of help. The lord caught up with her and put his sword to her throat. He wanted to kill the countess. Valoa, coughing in her eyes, was hatred and bewilderment. She had no fear, the girl thought. Princess Valoa acted correctly. Instead of sympathy, she should have trusted her decisions. The countess survived so many attacks in the short story. Lord Iton had to die even earlier. If she were smarter and acted with caution, like a princess, could not allow such a situation. Suddenly, a stranger appeared in the mantle and hit the Lord Outno with his foot right in the face. This was a surprise to the countess. The stranger took out his dagger and wanted to strike Lord. He wanted to kill Outno that he did not harm Valoa. The Lord grabbed the stranger's hand and defended himself with his last strength to dodge the blow. Men were preparing for a bloody battle, and the countess sat on the floor and was discouraged from what was happening. The Lord made a decision, continue to fight, surrender or run. A plan was brewing in his head. Iton decided to run as quickly as possible. The stranger wanted to bring the battle to the end and catch up with the Lord. Valoa grabbed the stranger by the mantle. It's so easy for him to go through the mountains. Most likely he ran to the wagon. Her throat hurt from the grasp. She forgave not to kill him, because she needs to find out something. In the garden, the stranger caught up with Iton. The Lord stunned the whole guard. He is an unusual person. It is worth being careful. Iton kneeling in front of Valoa. She now realized why no one came to the rescue. She wanted to tear out all his gray hair. But first you need to find out something. The Lord stood, his head bowed, motionless. The countess resolutely began to one knee in front of the Lord and asked, why did he do this to her? She, like no one, knew that he was not capable of this. Who ordered him to kill her? The Lord was silent. Valoa will have to hand him over to the court as a criminal if he does not receive an answer. Iton said, I'm sorry. He was ashamed of his act, but he did not give out the customer of the murder. The guards took him. Only a stranger and countess remained on the garden. They escorted the results with a look. The stranger said, thinking about the future, it would be worth killing him now. Valoa looked at him in surprise. She thought that the stranger was right. But in order not to happen, she does not want to kill people of her own free will. The girl bowed and thanked the stranger. Thank you for saving me twice. Your Majesty. She recognized him immediately, but admitted only now. Cardan looked inquiringly. He was very surprised at the recognition of Valoa. She bowed in front of him in curtsy. Cardan said with a malicious smile, as I thought about her, nothing is impossible to hide. Valoa continued, I will never forget that you saved me twice. She was sincerely grateful to Cardan. Cardan asked to leave gratitude to himself. If not for the contract, he would leave her to die. Valoa laughed and said, You are an example for those how to follow the terms of the contract. The king did everything he could and was going to leave. The girl got angry that he could not leave like that. Valois said, "Why don't the Cardins spend the night here, and tomorrow will not hit the road? If she dies, the contract will be violated." It turns out the king went there in vain and back behind her.